Bab, Hashem, Adonai, we declare and we decree in Yeshua's name. We say that the government of Australia is on the shoulders of Yeshua HaMashiach. My name is Mungan Bana, Norman Miller, co-founder of the Indigenous Friends of Israel International. I'm standing here as an Aboriginal leader in front of Parliament House today, 6th of December, on the 86th anniversary of the stand of Aboriginal William Cooper and the Australian Aborigines League in Melbourne. It was a stand against anti-Semitism then, and mine is a stand against anti-Semitism now. He protested the Nazi treatment of Jews at Kristallnacht in 1938. Germany is now Israel's friend. My stand is against the treatment of Israel by the Australian government and the United Nations. On Wednesday, the Australian government reversed 20 years of bipartisanship and supported a UN resolution demanding an end to Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territories of Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It also calls for the end of new settlement activities and the removal of settlers from occupied territory. It also calls for a conference next June to set the Palestinian territories on an irreversible pathway to a two-state solution. So Australia and the UN are calling for the ethnic cleansing of Jews from their ancient homelands. For a start, what some call the West Bank is Judea and Samaria, the heartland of ancient Israel. The Jews are indigenous to Israel. It is not an occupied territory. Also, Jerusalem is not occupied and is not the West Bank. It is the ancient undivided capital of Israel. The Morrison government called these disputed territories, but the Albanese Wong government uses the loaded term, the term preferred by terrorists, occupied territories. The Australian government favours the terminology of Israel's enemies instead of that of Israel, its allies, and the only democratic state in the Middle East. The Albanese government reversed the Morrison government's decision to recognise West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel in October 2022. The Australian government would rather reward the terrorism of October 7 and has continually pushed for a two-state solution where all the territories want is a one-state solution. Terrorists, what they want is a one-state solution. With the removal of Israel and the Jewish people, Hamas wants Hitler's final solution to prevail in the Middle East, where Jews have been systematically ethnic cleansed from Arab lands. Australia joined 156 nations yesterday to back a 7-page resolution supporting the realisation of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, primarily the rights to self-determination and the right to their independent state. While the request for a Palestinian state is understandable, this has been offered to them many times and they have refused because they do not recognise Israel as the ancient homeland of the Jewish people who are indigenous to that land. Palestinian Arabs rejected a peaceful solution many times. 1947-48, the Oslo peace process from 1993, the Camp David Summit of 2000, the Gaza disengagement of 2005, and the Annapolis process of 2007-08, to name some of them. Australia and Doc Everett were at the forefront in the United Nations of voting for and offering a 1947 partition plan for the British Mandate to be divided into a Jewish state and an Arab state, as the word Palestinian was not in vogue then. Vogue. The Arabs rejected it. Australia and Doc Everett were at the forefront of accepting Israel as a member of the UN in 1949. Let's not reverse all our history of support for Israel and reward the terrorism of October 7 and beyond. Doc Everett would be disappointed to see where Australia and the ALP are now. So would former ALP Prime Minister Bob Hawke, who introduced a motion to the Australian Parliament in 1986, deploring the 1975 UN Zionism is Racism resolution and calling for its rescinding. I was in Israel for the 100th anniversary of the Australian Light Horse Charge that helped free Beersheba and make way for the end of the Ottoman Empire, and the eventual setting up of the State of Israel in 1948. This joint celebration by Israel, Australia and others was a high point in our relationship. At CMAC, our Aboriginal light horsemen also fought an historic battle. Israel is not a colonial settler racist apartheid state, but was decolonized in 1948 from centuries of colonization by various powers. It was settled by as many Jews of color made refugees from Arab lands as Jews fleeing from Holocaust in Europe. There are Arabs in all professions, including the Knesset, its parliament. Considering the blood of Australians, black and white, has been shed for the freedom and right to life and safety of Jewish people in Israel, it is reprehensible that the Australian government would sell out Israel today and reward terrorist groups who committed the atrocities of October 7 with an irreversible pathway to statehood without a guarantee of an agreement regarding the survival of the Jewish state and agreed on boundaries. We deplore the Australian government's funding of UNRWA to the tune of millions, despite the UN's admission that it was part of the terrorist attack on October 7, and that its schools, hospitals, headquarters, etc. have been used to store weapons. Also that its schools train to hate and kill Jews. We call on the Australian government to give its humanitarian aid through other avenues like the Red Cross. We call on the Australian government to withdraw its membership from the International Criminal Court, which after issuing arrest warrants against Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, is lacking credibility. It has accepted false accusations and not followed due process, has not given Israel the right of reply, cancelling a trip to Israel to discuss the case, and does not have the jurisdiction in this matter. The ICC has jurisdiction only over member states, and Israel is not a member, and Gaza is not a state. Israel, while defending itself against promises of many repeats of October 7, has achieved the lowest ratio of civilian to combatant deaths in the history of urban warfare and facilitated 11 million tons of aid, even though Hamas' rampant theft means Israel is provisioning its battlefield enemy, something the law doesn't require. Consequently, we call on the Australian government to, and we declare and we decree it, support Israel at the United Nations instead of terror organizations, and reverse its many decisions adverse to Israel, including the one this week and the recent one on Palestinian sovereignty of resources. We call on the Australian government for the immediate release of all hostages in Gaza, the cessation of attacks on Israel by Hamas and other territories, and a governing structure in Gaza that does not involve Hamas or other terrorist groups. Withdraw from the ICC, which is not administering impartial justice. Defund UNRWA and provide humanitarian aid via another means. Move the Australian Embassy from Tel Aviv to West Jerusalem. To deal decisively with anti-Semitism in Australia and its weak response to anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests has incited an alarming rise in anti-Semitism in Australia. This includes adequate laws and enforcement. And the last one of what we are calling the government to, this last 7 points, is to follow due diligence in security checks for visas from areas of conflict like Gaza. Am Yisrael High. The people of Israel will live.
Am Yisrael
Am Yisrael High.
Am Yisrael High.